Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and great day. Welcome to another episode of the Cynthia Manion Show. Please share this out and subscribe on YouTube. Our guest tonight is Allie Hopper. She is the president and co-founder of Guard Against Trafficking and one of the country's leading voices against child trafficking. She interviews incarcerated traffickers, investigates along the U.S. Mexican border, and helped pass Florida's 2023 Anti-Grooming Bill that's now a model nationwide. Allie, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much. Woo!
Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia.
This is such a serious subject, and I want everyone to understand what an expert you are on it. So we're going to start with a 5-minute interview you recently did for the Homeland Security community. But do you want to lead them up to that a little bit and tell them a little bit how you got there? And it's going to be 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. And it is just, wow.
Yeah, so my business partner and I, we conduct research on the ground firsthand in person. And for the testimonies, we've testified 5 times in under 2 years. So that is the value of the insights that we bring because it's firsthand, it's in person, it's our experiences that we've seen. And it's not through another individual or reading a report. And so some of the findings that we were reporting on were really shocking, and we came to Capitol Hill to actually speak on those issues. So that is what led to the testimony. 5 times in under 2 years was the findings that we've gathered.
And it is heart-wrenching. Eric, if you will, please. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a 5-minute interview she recently did. We will be back. Share this out. Everyone needs to know about it. Eric, we don't have sound.
Oh, the joys of technology.
Oh, it worked perfectly in rehearsal 2 minutes ago. It'll be fine. Maybe unmute yourself because it worked when you were unmuted, I think.
Dirty and shaking, left to die at the border by the cartel. Chairman Guest, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Allie Hopper, president and co-founder of Guard Against Trafficking, a nonprofit dedicated to combating human trafficking. As a Hispanic mother, I have held a 6-year-old Colombian child in my arms, cold, dirty, and shaking, left to die at the border by the cartel. I have seen children that have crossed the border alone, holding scraps of paper with sponsor information given to them by the cartels. When I testified in November, we discussed the exploitation of children at our border. Today, countless children continue to be neglected, abused, or trafficked by a system meant to protect them. We must ask, how was this allowed to happen, and what role did NGOs play? My research partner, Dr. Jared Sadolsky, and I have conducted extensive field work, including interviewing incarcerated traffickers, cartel members, whistleblowers, and unaccompanied alien children themselves. An ORR field specialist had visited a home to place a 17-year-old and reported serious concerns, most notably that the adult claiming to be the child's mother was adorned in MS-13 tattoos. Despite these concerns, ORR leadership overruled that specialist. Tragically, 3 months later, that child was found dead. his pants around his ankles, with an older man passed out next to him. This heartbreaking case is not isolated. It highlights a system overwhelmed by both scale and mismanagement. Since 2008, over $20 billion has been dispersed under the UAC program, almost $14 billion of that in the last 6 years alone, meaning over 2/3 of funding was spent in just 1/3 of the program's lifespan. Yet despite this massive investment, hundreds of thousands of children remain unaccounted for as the U.S. taxpayer dollars fueled a system hijacked by criminal networks. No-bid billion-dollar contracts were awarded with little oversight, while influx facilities became transportation hubs. A striking example is Endeavor's. Their IRS filings show revenue soaring from $65 million in 2019 to $1.18 billion in 2022, driven almost entirely by federal contracts. During this time, CEO John Allman's salary rose from $292,000 to $730,000, with six-figure executive surge bonuses added. Endeavor's ended 2022 with a $112 million surplus. Andrew Lorenzen-Strait, a former Biden transition official and ICE advisor, helped secure no-bid federal contracts for Endeavor's and was caught on camera calling the border crisis a boom for business. Inside Endeavor's, leadership blocked critical safety protocols, resisted oversight, and silenced internal dissent. Our interviews with contracted auditors at Endeavor's Pico, Texas facility revealed disturbing findings. Male staff had been found inside female dorm rooms. An employee had led 150 teenage girls in sexually explicit routines, dance routines, teaching them how to twerk on multiple occasions. A female over 18 had been shielded from ICE. Others nearing 18 were released early to avoid transfer to ICE. And auditors were blocked from reviewing child sponsor placements. These abuses are not unique to Endeavor's. Similar patterns existed across multiple NGOs. Federal contracts had prioritized speed over safety and rewarded output over outcomes, conditions which cartels exploited. A cartel operative in Tecate, Mexico, explained to us how children were routinely kidnapped and funneled into the U.S. for profit. Cartels infiltrated NGOs along those smuggling routes, turning humanitarian pathways into trafficking pipelines. Weak sponsor vetting worsened this problem. An HHS audit later found that 70% of sponsor applications were fraudulent, making proper post-placement welfare checks nearly impossible. Recently, we discovered about 117 unaccompanied children believed to be trafficked on a farm in the Midwest, where our intervention sparked a current investigation. These cases are emerging nationwide. Last week, ICE and CBP arrested about 361 illegal aliens at 2 cannabis farms in California, finding 10 unaccompanied children. So where do we go from here? This is not about politics. It's about protecting children and confronting modern-day slavery. Good intentions and humanitarian missions must never excuse harm when policies enable exploitation. Accountability and decisive action must ensure it never happens again.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper.
Wow, you did an excellent job on that. I can't even imagine what you did to prepare. And this is our own Reese Witherspoon here. She's like the Good Morning Show. Have you ever watched that? Going out,
No.
getting the story. Actually, you sat across from convicted traffickers in prison. What's
Yep.
the one thing that they all say that still shocks you?
I mean, I guess not much shocks me. We've talked about everything: sex trafficking, labor trafficking, organ harvesting, illegal adoption. We've talked about it all. I guess the one thing that kind of, I guess, still shocks me, I guess you could say, is just that you don't see life in their eyes anymore. And so it's really weird. It's really dark to come face to face with someone that has lost a piece of their soul. because you have to almost lose your soul to be able to do that kind of work, to see human beings as commodities, to be able to exchange children for profit. So
what moment on the U.S. Mexican border made you realize how big this problem really is?
I guess the first time that I saw it, when it was wide open, I was actually seeing people come into the country just walking right in. There were, in some areas, no meaningful border wall. And so people could literally just walk right in. They had all of their things. There were middle-aged men, just military-aged men, just walking right in with no one greeting them, no border patrol agent in sight. And so we did see unaccompanied minors. We saw them with slips of paper where they were told, this is who I'm to request to be my sponsor. You know, I remember asking one of the children, do you know this person? Like, do you know where this is? Do you know this person? And they're like, no. So.
How did Florida's 2023 anti-grooming bill come together? And why is it a game changer for kids?
Yeah, so that's a great question because it kind of takes the story back a little bit. So at the time, I had just moved to Florida, and my family were really active in, advocacy and child protection. And so we had wanted to get involved. We got in touch with an individual that was running a nonprofit that was spearheading child protection trainings. And she had said, I don't have the ability to focus on this piece of legislation. Do you want to take it and run with it? And when I had looked at it, what it was it was an amendment to an anti-grooming bill. But the amendment was to an anti-grooming bill that was in Illinois. And I'm a paralegal, my dad's an attorney. And we looked at it and we said, well, we can't do anything with this because it only amends a grooming bill if a state has a grooming bill. So we looked at our criminal code in Florida and realized, well, we don't have a grooming bill. So this language doesn't really help us. We have to start from scratch. We're going to have to look at this grooming bill where that amendment was based out of the bill out of Illinois. So we looked at their language. It was passed in 2012. And so we're like, okay, well, how can we make this language more robust? How can we make sure that it's up to date with the different grooming patterns and methods and strategies that are used on our children? And so we developed language and found lawmakers, and they embraced it wholeheartedly and got it introduced, passed, and signed into law in under 8 months.
It's amazing. This woman is a go-getter, wouldn't you say, ladies and gentlemen? It's very
well, and I kind of want to, I just want to touch on what it is for the anti-grooming bill, it makes it a legal definition in the criminal code as far as what it means for an adult to sexually groom a minor. And so really, unless it's in the criminal code, law enforcement can't intervene. Every state has a criminal code. And so if a adult is sexually communicating or conducting themselves with a minor, unless it crosses the line of luring and enticing or obscenity or exchanging photos or videos, law enforcement really can't intervene. So in situations like sexting, they can't do anything until it crosses a further line. So this legislation made it a felony 3 in Florida, and now it's passed in a couple other states. Iowa was running it at the same time we were. We had a very close connection and collaboration with Iowa when we reached out to them to run the bill. Representative Mark Thompson embraced it wholeheartedly, ran the bill from start to finish, and passed it in Iowa. And now it's being used. So it's bittersweet, Cynthia, because you hope that you never have to think about these things, but the fact that it's being used means 2 things. 1, that it's desperately needed, and 2, that we have a serious problem.
And how do we get this in all the states?
So they can definitely reach out to me. I can help them with the legislation because every criminal code, like I had said, is different. So what I did with Iowa was, and I did it with Florida, was a statutory assessment. I looked at their criminal code, reviewed their statutes that are for child protection, and I identified the gaps and loopholes within their statutes that make a bad actor or a criminal or a predator able to kind of navigate around the gaps and loopholes or through the gaps and loopholes to be able to harm a child. And so that was what worked in Iowa, was identifying the key statutes and saying, look, these are the gaps that exist, and this is how this legislation would help bridge those gaps.
And here is guardagainsttrafficking.org, where you can reach out to Allie. Please do. For parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters watching tonight, what's the biggest red flag that they might miss that a child is being groomed online, Allie?
A change in behavior. So, and when I say that, a lot of parents think instantly, they'll think bullying, they'll think maybe an influence of friends, they'll think maybe, is my child getting involved with drugs, alcohol, the wrong crowd? But they don't start to also look at, are they having communication with individuals that they may or may not know? Are these communications healthy, or are they crossing a very unhealthy boundary? Are they leading into explicit conversations? And what the FBI has deemed this year is that sextortion is the fastest growing online threat to teenagers across the country. Parents need to realize that. Parents need to realize that a change in behavior doesn't just mean hormones, doesn't just mean my teenager had a bad day, or maybe, they're being bullied. It begs the question of, could there be additional circumstances that we're not considering? And we should be considering all of these things, not just a few of these things.
And what would a parent do? How would the parent go about?
Well, if it's in a reactive case, if you notice these things, you would start to, first of all, have a conversation with your child. Every relationship is different. I would never begin to be the first person to tell people how to parent their children, but unvetted access to the internet via phones, via gaming systems, via computers and tablets, it makes it very hard for parents to keep a pulse on how their children are doing. And so there are programs out there like the Bark phone, there's parental controls. You can start to do that in an age appropriate way. And I do encourage that if you introduce technology to children at a very young age, that yes, absolutely, those parental controls should be considered. Once you get to a teenager that is getting in their later teens, we want to start to move from parental monitoring to parental navigation and guidance. There's a program out there called Cell Phone Permit. And what I really like about that is how to safely navigate the internet. And it's a protocol, it's a training for parents and children. And the mindset is that you don't just hand the keys to your car to your teenager and say, here you go ahead, just stop at the stop signs, stop at the red lights, and don't hit anything. No, they have to go through driver's ed. They have to go through a certain amount of hours where they're driving with their parent, and then they have to take a test to get their driver's license. And even then, that doesn't ensure that they're safe operating on the roadway. But a car is a tool. A car can get you from point A to point B. It can be a good thing, but it can also be very dangerous if people aren't careful. And that is technology. Technology is a car. It is a tool that can get us from point A to point B, and it can help bridge many gaps. But if we're not careful, it can also be very dangerous. And so what I like about Cell Phone Permit is that it teaches healthy internet safety practices. And this training, like I had said, is parents take it with their children. So they're learning together. And what I really liked about that is if a child finds themselves in a situation where they're navigating the internet in an unhealthy way after taking this course. I had spoken with somebody, they said, yeah, I just have my child retake cell phone permit. Because obviously they need to go back and review some of the lessons in there. But what's really nice about it is it doesn't just protect against human trafficking. It doesn't just protect against sextortion and grooming. It provides a positive way to navigate the internet. It also prevents or helps mitigate cyberbullying, circumstances of cyberbullying. I know that they're coming out with how to navigate AI. That's going to be huge for our young, our young generation. The internet's not going anywhere. AI is not going anywhere. And so when a teenager hits age appropriate, and that is determined by the parent, that is when we should be starting to teach them how to safely navigate and understand that even when we teach them, it's still a level of risk. So understanding when we want to introduce certain pieces of technology, and understanding that risk is still out there. There are predators out there. There are bad actors out there. And we get the emails, how many registered offenders live in your radius of where you live, but they don't do that for the internet. They don't send you an alert saying, oh, hey, just a heads up, you're in the vicinity or in an online room with a documented predator. They don't do that. And so the case of sextortion, I want to go back to what that is a profile is typically created. So let's say a boy is communicating with a profile where he believes it's a girl. But on the other end, it's a middle-aged man. What he had done was created a fake profile, created a fake name, either created a photo, AI generated, or took someone else's, and starts interacting with this boy, saying, oh, what do you like? I like these things. How are your friends? And they start to befriend each other, and it starts to go into that grooming process where you befriend someone. There's manipulation involved. There's exchanging of information. We've had children that have exchanged names, addresses, birthdays, personal information with someone that they don't know on the internet. And then they end up exchanging photos and videos. And when that happens, that is when the rug is pulled out from under them, because then they're extorted by either saying, you need to send me more photos or videos, you need to send me money, or you need to do these things for me. Otherwise, I'm going to release these photos to your friends. I'm going to send them to your parents. I'm going to send them to your school. And that, pornography is illegal. So you're going to get in so much trouble. And at this point, many of these teens that we've spoken to are so embarrassed, and they think it's the end of the world, that they don't see a way out. They don't talk to their parents. They don't talk to a trusted adult. And so they have been taking their lives over this. And my business partner and I were actually leading a training in Fort Worth, Texas on sextortion. It was a room full of parents. One of the parents, we didn't know until 3 days later, she had gone home, learned about what we were talking about, learned about the signs, actually looked through her son's phone and realized he was being sextorted, Cynthia. He was days away from taking his own life. And so these trainings, this awareness actually saves lives. But what we want to do is we want to train parents so that they're aware before harm comes to their child. And in this case, there was harm to her son. But before further harm, before irreversible harm came to her son, where he had taken his own life, and that was permanent. So there are tools out there to educate parents. There are tools out there to educate children. There are tools out there that if photos are posted online of a minor, you can petition to get it taken down very promptly. And now there is the Take It Down Act, which also holds some of the platforms accountable. So legislation is moving in the right direction, but awareness is still going to be the absolute most important vehicle to protect your children, because right now we used to talk about the white van at the end of the street, at the end of the park, and the white van is in your living room. You're cooking dinner and you don't realize that the white van is in your child's hand, and it's the person that they're communicating with because they're on their phone, or because they are on Discord and they're on Roblox, or, you know, there's so many different social medias and apps out there that predators can have access to our children. So it's just really important that parents are aware that this isn't a foreign country problem. This isn't a border problem. Human trafficking starts with grooming. It's not the snatch and grabs. It starts with grooming. It starts with the recruitment, the manipulation, and sometimes even sextortion. And so this is what we're seeing. And this is why with Guard Against Trafficking, we don't just talk about trafficking. Those are, you know, some of the things we talk about, but we talk about the stages that also lead up to trafficking and how we can stop it before it leads to trafficking.
That was unbelievably informative. And I love the analogy with learning how to drive. That really puts it in a capsule so you can really talk about that. And share this out, ladies and gentlemen. Replay that. Do those courses. Take the classes. Get them. My goodness gracious. That's so important. That was so good. That was so good, Allie. Robert Brooker says hello.
Hi, Robert.
You got driver's training, but did you get sex education training? Did you get training to protect yourself from trafficking? I mean, I'm thinking also, you said it was in one of the videos I saw of you that you said it was easier for someone to adopt or get a child than to get a dog. That was outrageous. Can you speak on that, please?
Yeah, so for the Unaccompanied Alien Children program, when they came across the border, I had mentioned that they came over with slips of paper in their hand. And they're supposed to be on paper. There was policies that were looked at more like recommendations and guidelines at the time. Not that they were requirements, to do meaningful vetting of the sponsors that they were requesting. So that would or should have looked like getting proper documentation, income verification, address verification, who are the other adults that are living in the household. These are the things that when I adopted a dog, they actually asked for all of these things. They asked for what other pets are in the household. You know, how often are you home? What does your income look like? Are you going to be able to support this pet? But they didn't do that for these sponsors. They didn't do any meaningful background checks. They didn't do address verification. All that occurred that we were able to confirm was that they checked in the USPS, the post office database, to make sure that it was a real address. Well, HSI has said some of these real addresses, when they were looking for these children, led them to an open field, led them to a Burger King, led them to a strip club. So yeah, they're a real address, but are they an address of a home? Are they an address of the listed sponsor? Are there other adults that live in the household? Does the sponsor have a criminal record? Many cases, some of the sponsors were determined later after the fact that they had gang ties to cartel, ties to criminal activity. So this is what we were talking about in that testimony. One of the lines of questioning was that, you know, they were talking about the sponsor vetting, and it was abhorrent for us to find out that there was little to no meaningful sponsor vetting. And even when someone raised a red flag, when a caseworker raised a red flag on one of the sponsors, their concerns were ignored. They were disregarded. So, but the disheartening part of it for Americans should be A, that children were harmed in this, but B, that we paid for this, Cynthia. We paid for cartels to use our tax dollars to transfer children to the sponsor of the cartel's choice for the children to pay off their debt, either by sex or labor. And we were the vehicles. We were the people that paid for them to get from point A to point B. So that's why in one of my testimonies, I said it was an assembly line of exploitation, because they would face exploitation along the journey, end up at the border. We would transport them, all across the country. They went to every single city, every single state across the country. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement, if you look in Health and Human Services website, Office of Refugee Resettlement, UAC program, Unaccompanied Alien Children program, this administration has revamped the site. So now it's actually a lot easier to navigate. But they were actually showing how many UACs were sent to every city, every county. They were breaking it down by city, county, state. You could see where a lot of these UACs ended up. And so when we would go and conduct these trainings in various states, I think we were in Rhode Island one time, and we were speaking to the audience, and we were like, so how many UACs do you think came into your state? And so we actually pulled up the data after they guessed, and they were astounded because there was hundreds. They didn't know in their area, in the vicinity of where they were, there were hundreds of children that were sent there.
Dan Altmeyer is here. Hi, Dan. And he says, this is so disturbing. Thanks for your uncovering this travesty. I know, Dan, I had Paul Hutchinson on. I did not even know or realize that it was happening in the United States of America. It's like, I don't know, we think it's somewhere else, not so prevalent. And the fact that you have taken this on, what made you do that? It's amazing.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. I think the big thing that I think people need to realize is what's driving a lot of this, unfortunately, is that there's a demand issue in this country. The cartels are providing children because our country is in demand of children for sex and labor. And we are one of the highest buyers for sex trafficking, for child sex trafficking. And so we need to really look in the mirror as Americans and realize what is going on with our society. How can we look inwards and really address, because it's a heart issue, really address the heart, the morality of the issue, and see why are we as a society okay with and are driving a demand for children. So I think that Sound of Freedom was a fantastic movie, but like you said, it brought attention to trafficking, but people thinking it was happening elsewhere and not realizing that, yeah, that was happening in the jungles of Colombia, but that it's happening in the forests and the plains of the United States. It's happening in urban, rural, suburban, all across. So no area in this country is immune from it. And one of our trainings, when we train law enforcement, and actually we train community members on this too, we say, envision for a second what a trafficker looks like to you. What does a trafficker look like to you? Physically, psychologically, what do you think that they would look like to you? And then we ask the same thing for victims. What does a victim look like to you? What do you picture? Who do you picture would be a victim of human trafficking? And then we do that for buyers. We say, well, who do you think is buying, sex and human beings for labor? Who, when in your mind, what do you envision? And then by the end of it, we say, well, a trafficker can be male and female. And actually, we're even seeing adults use children to recruit other children. So, introduce that into the mix. The victims, male, female, boys, girls, all socioeconomic, statuses, from the wealthiest to the poorest, from rural to urban, all across the spectrum. And then buyers, men and women. We've seen married couples partake together. So people need to realize that it's really hard to stereotype who is a victim, who could be a trafficker, and who could be a buyer, because they're very blended.
Oof. Dan said he saw a quote from a cartel member saying that I can only sell drugs once, but humans I can sell over and over again. This hurts my heart, my soul, my mind, my body. For everyday people who want to help, what's one simple action that actually moves the needle, Allie?
Well, supporting organizations like ours is one thing, because we are doing everything we can to spread the message, spread awareness from everything, like we had discussed, grooming, sextortion, discussing policy, legislation, bringing it to Capitol Hill, interviewing incarcerated traffickers. And we do this work on the ground domestically here in the U.S., on the border, Mexico, Central America, South America. And we work with other countries as well, because we want to understand human trafficking and try and get ahead of it, and not be 10 steps and 5 years behind with all of the data and all of the patterns and findings. We want to get ahead of it. And so this is how you get ahead. I would say to your listeners, go to Guard Against Trafficking. If you have a teenager, please, depending on how old they are, go through parental controls, whether it's Bark, Gab, parental controls through your cell phone provider. And then when they get age appropriate, check out programs like Cell Phone Permit. Check out other programs that educate children about how to navigate the internet safely, how to navigate AI safely, and just have that open communication with your children, because no matter what, they need to know that they can come to you no matter what, because these things will get them to clam up and go in a direction that we don't want children to go. So I would suggest awareness is the first step. It's great to be aware. Statistics are helpful. Statistics, I spend a lot of time around statistics. A lot of them are very old. And by old, I mean 2-3 years. That doesn't seem old, but that is very old when you're trying to get on the cutting edge of countering this humanitarian crisis. And so what people need to realize is awareness, but action. So I'm aware of the problem now. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to protect my children? How am I going to protect myself? How am I going to protect the future of this country? So let's say you're a grandparent. Those are your grandchildren that could be exposed. Let's say you don't have any children. Well, that's your future doctor, your future lawyer, your future police officer. Those are the people that are going to be leading your community in the future. So we need to have a community-minded approach when we're trying to combat human trafficking, because if for anything, we look back at history and we see, the civil rights movement, and we say, thank God we abolished slavery. Thank God we fought the Civil War and won, because slavery is wrong. And we wonder why certain people didn't look when they saw human beings enslaved in front of them. Why didn't they do something? Why didn't they feel something? Why didn't they try and fight it? But it's happening in front of us right now. And we need to realize that human beings are enslaved still. And we're none the wiser that it's happening in our own communities. So we need to become aware of it. It is very dark. But I have spoken to a trafficker, Cynthia, that actually said, we like that you guys don't talk about it. because it allows us to keep doing what we do. It's too dark for people to talk about. So let it be too dark because we're able to keep doing what we do. So that actually emboldened me and my business partner to say, no, we're not going to let this, hide in the darkness. We're going to be the ones that shine a light on this issue. Not the only ones, but some of the ones that shine a light on this issue. And this battlefield is not too crowded to have more warriors in this fight. So we welcome everyone to at least become aware and to take the steps necessary to at least protect your own family. If everyone did just that, the numbers would go down significantly. If everyone did just enough to protect those inside of their own homes, that would move the needle.
Every single step, ladies and gentlemen, every single step forward is a step to save a life, a legacy, a child, a future predator. Patricia Gaikich, hi, darling. Thank you for being here. After years being involved in Cambodia, it's beyond shocking. And all Ali says is true. It is mind-boggling and deeply covert. My whole heart is just like, oh. Thank you, Patty, for being here. And hi, Jake. He says, so true, so true, so true. So you can make a difference every single day. And what you say, what you watch, what you allow to happen in your community. And I think that was a very good point. Communication, talking about it, and not letting dark take over. You've exposed serious flaws in this unaccompanied children's program. What's the scariest gap there besides no accountability, no one following up? Oh, and you said 65,000 phone calls and no one was answering them when there was an emergency number for people to call, an emergency hotline that no one answered? What the heck?
Yeah. I think so. This happened when the border was open, and we don't like to make it a partisan issue. The problem is that no matter, where we're pointing the finger, we want to find these children. We want solutions to this problem, and we want to make sure this never happens again. And when you have a hotline, and from what I had said in the hearing was that from August 2023 to January of 2025, there were 65,000 unanswered phone calls. And this was the individuals that were actually able to break away and make a phone call to the hotline. 65,000 unanswered calls because one person was assigned to the hotline. And these calls were gone through when this administration came in, and they had identified the 65,000 calls. They went through them, and they were actually able to save some children and arrest some sponsors. But time had passed since then. So the abuse had continued on from when that phone call was received. So that's where it's not a partisan issue. When I introduced the grooming bill, the anti-grooming bill, I wanted both sides of the aisle to come together because I said, you know what? If this is going to be the one thing that we can unite on, it is protecting our children, protecting children altogether. Let this be the one thing, if we have to pick one thing, that unites everybody, because we all agree that our children are the most precious thing to us, or at least they are to me, So that is why this issue should be something that unites everybody, that it's something that most people can agree on, except for the ones that are profiting from it and the ones that are, perpetuating it. Everyone else should be able to agree that we want to unite to protect children.
We've gotten a lot of responses here. Here's Patricia. Patricia Gajkic. Researchers at the University of South Florida estimate there were 200,000 victims of sex trafficking in the state in 2024. A research lab at the university developed what it called a first of its kind report commissioned by the state, looking at the prevalence of trafficking in the Sunshine State. In addition, the report estimates that there were 540,000 victims of labor exploitation or trafficking last year. Of those sex trafficked, USF estimates half were minors. And you live in Florida now, so you can probably speak to that.
Yes, Patricia knows her stuff.
Yes,
That's the tipster report. Yes.
Unfortunately, all the... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it's the first of its kind. They put together a think tank to focus on this issue because a lot of the statistics were coming out of the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So by the time someone reports something, by the time those statistics get to a database to be processed, that data is old. That data is not helpful. And so USF has data because they studied Florida. And it's good. It's good. Don't get me wrong. That information is so helpful. But it's only Florida. If every state could emulate what USF did in our state and emulate it and repeat it throughout all 50 states, then we would actually get a good idea of what human trafficking looks like in our country. But that's going to take people really motivating and dedicating to wanting to know the truth. A lot of law enforcement agencies are less than reluctant to admit that they have a human trafficking problem. And it's not to say that they're complicit. It's not that. It's that sometimes prostitution is misconstrued or misunderstood. And so people will deem prostitution, they'll see something and they'll think it's prostitution. But without further investigation, to confirm consent, they're not realizing that it's actually trafficking. So many of the education, the training that we give law enforcement agencies, departments, we go into the conversation about prostitution. We go into the discussion that if they have a pimp, which I hate that term, they're a trafficker, because if you're being controlled, money, movement, your freedom, and your well-being, you can't quit your job because you're going to end up with a broken wrist, broken ribs, black eye, or possibly your life taken from you. That is a sex trafficker. That's not a pimp. And so we need agencies to look at prostitution in a different way and really investigate if there is a consent factor there, or if it could be sex trafficking.
Yeah. So Dan says, who is being paid to run the hotline? Was this fraud?
I am not sure. I would have to look back at my notes who was contracted, but part of the problem is that things weren't properly staffed at that time and things were overwhelmed. I mean, even Border Patrol, they were overwhelmed at the sheer volume of people coming over the border. They could not even process individuals in a meaningful way because it was just like the floodgates had opened. And so now, the faucet has been turned down. Now the cartels are ticked that the border is virtually shut. Now they're having to go through tunnels that they haven't used in a while, and they're having to dust off little entrances to tunnels when they were freely flowing over the border. So yes, we have to look at who got the contract to run the hotline. were they overwhelmed, or did they just fail to deliver on the services that they had said they were going to provide, and make sure that something like this doesn't happen again?
We got quite a few other comments here. Let's see what we got. Yeah, it's worldwide. Jake in Down Under says that happens in Australia also. Very unnerving. Where are the parents? Can he use those apps that you mentioned earlier in the broadcast for educating his family and other people and other parents? You can start the whole thing in Australia, Jake, and save your children's children.
Yeah.
It's worldwide. And Ryan Paul, if only Dex Morgan were real, hopefully more resources would be allocated to this terrible problem. Yes, thanks, Ryan Paul. Thanks for joining us. So you've worked with law enforcement and lawmakers. Who surprised you the most with their willingness to act? Let's try and find a good story.
I think everyone that we've encountered is willing to act, when the issue is brought to their attention.
I would think so. I really would. But
other than the trafficker, I guess I could say. Other than those interviews, yes.
How do traffickers use social media and gaming platforms to target kids? Like they're the kids innocently playing a game and they join it. They pretend they're someone else. You said this earlier, but are there other ways? Because that's how can the person tell that it's a fake person?
It's very hard. It's very hard. That has to do with that internet safety. Is it even worth talking to someone you don't know? The risk benefit analysis, finding out, okay, you don't know this person. You're not going to be able to validate who they are. Let's say you're playing Roblox. They're little avatars on a TV or on a gaming console. And so there's this open chat function. And so people start, just chatting. They don't even know what the other person looks like. So on social media, sometimes they have to upload a profile picture and things of that nature. But on gaming consoles, they're just avatars.
Yeah.
So just being
moms and dads, re-listen to this, share it out to community, have a community meeting, reach out to Allie, guardagainsttrafficking.org. And what's the hardest truth about trafficking that most Americans and other parents throughout the entire universe still don't want to believe, Allie? That it exists, probably.
That it exists, that it's happening in their city, that it's happening in their state. Even if we can get people to understand that it's happening in their state, most people say, oh, well, it's happening probably over there or over there. And you get people like from both cities, like pointing at each other, like, oh yeah, it's happening, in their areas. But they're not realizing that it's happening everywhere. And because the internet is so prevalent, it's happening everywhere. It can happen anywhere. And so we just need to really be aware of the threats and take it seriously. And awareness is the first step. Action is the second. And like I said, if every parent, grandparent, guardian just secured the children in their own homes, as far as making sure that they were educated, the parents were educated, that there's an understanding that certain games, platforms, tools aren't going to be used unless there's a mutual understanding of how it works. If everyone just took care of their household, that would drive the numbers down drastically. And you can get the most caring, concerned parent too, and it still happens. Because these traffickers, these groomers are good at what they do. So we need to keep doing what we do. It's like the DARE program. I'm sure everyone remembers the DARE program. In an age-appropriate way, educate people on drugs, combating drugs. Everyone knows that if you end up with a piece of your clothing on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. So we need it to be as instantaneous that if I see something, I'm going to say something and I know what to do. I know who to call, and start to understand that this is something that we need to be aware of and combat actively.
Allie, how do you protect your own heart through all of this? Mine's already ripping and I haven't even seen any of it close up, and I don't want to. Oh my gosh, you are an angel. Thank goodness that you are here. Thank you, God, for this little angel. Please protect
I was just gonna say
her mission wherever she goes. Please protect her always.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if your listeners, whatever your faith is, I'm very close to my faith in God. And so yes, I have a very close relationship. I have to. When you look in the eyes of like true evil and darkness, you have to hold steady and hold true and hold on to the good. And so that is, God is definitely my anchor, my light, keeps me grounded and keeps me hopeful. Because if I get deterred from this, then what happens?
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. I have like a zillion more questions. And we're already out of time. It feels like it's been like 3 minutes. Oh my God. I had other videos to play, and oh my gosh. What's the next piece of legislation you're fighting for now?
Well, I know that we have been talking with certain lawmakers about how to combat AI. AI is being used to create child abuse material. And so we're trying to figure out how to combat that legislatively, because the counter arguments tend to be like, well, no child was harmed in the making of this content.
Oh, ouch.
So these are the types of conversations that we're having. These are the types of conversations that lawmakers are having right now, and they're trying to wrap their minds around how to approach this issue in a very smart way. So, but I would encourage everyone that doesn't have an anti-grooming bill to look there, because a lot of these cases start with grooming. And if we can cut the head off the snake before it bites someone, then, we're going to make drastic changes. We're going to move the needle in a very meaningful way in this fight.
And we need to do it every day, every single day, ladies and gentlemen. Share this, pass it out, take the course, get your sexual driver's license. Ali, what's next for Guard Against Trafficking, and how can our audience stay connected and support the mission?
So right now we are in the year end, so it's our fundraising phase. I know our mutual friend Dan had mentioned that with year end, something having to do with the tax code is changing next year. That's why I have a financial planner to tell me all these things, because I don't know, how these things work. But something with the tax code is changing next year. So if people are, willing to donate and need a charitable organization that would greatly benefit from anything that people would be willing to give, please consider Guard Against Trafficking, because the donations are the lifeblood of the organization. This is how we're able to continue doing what we're doing, and this is how we're able to provide, get the research that we get, provide the education materials that we have, and provide testimony on Capitol Hill that actually moves the needle. And so I would suggest people go to Guard Against Trafficking and look at our information, look at what we do. And if your heart feels compelled to support us, then please consider donating.
Please, 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 please. Ali is an amazing woman. She's a mother, a wife. She has children. She works 40 plus hours. She was working 40 plus hours on one job and doing this on the side. Think about that. Traveling hundreds and hundreds of hours, lots and lots of dollars. Some angel came and gave her a big a donation or mission scholarship, and then they reneged. So we need to cover that for her so that she can continue to do this, because if not Allie, then who? Then you. Are you going to step up and go to these places? No, you're going to start with your own family and do the right thing. But meanwhile, let's have this angel, this warrior who has unlimited energy, obviously, do this. And it's her mission. It's in her heart. It's all she wants to do. Let's help it make it the easiest as possible so that she can do it with ease and grace. Right here is her X.com. She's very active on X. There are a lot of interviews out there that you can see. I do want to play one more real quick before we go. Play one, Eric. Play the second one I like, please. Just really quick to close so you can just see the impact she has. So she's not even working just with people, the good people, the bad people, the dark people. She's also going into the Senate, the floors, getting everyone involved. Go ahead, Eric. Thank you. Check this out. This is what we were talking about on the phone calls.
Victims and survivors. I'd like to explore the role that the NGOs have played in enabling the trafficking and exploitation of unaccompanied alien children. Under the last administration, what safeguards were put in place to protect vulnerable unaccompanied children?
I previously discussed the post-placement welfare checks, which consisted of 2 phone calls. Again, if the sponsor didn't answer, the case was no longer followed up on. But there was also a notice of concern hotline where people could report concerns about the unaccompanied child's safety. But what this administration found was from August 2023 to January of 2025, 65,000 calls went unanswered. Those calls spanned from, complaints about stale bread all the way to being abused, to one case where a child's call was reporting that grown men were coming into his room at night and they were touching him. Nothing happened with that call. That call went unanswered until this administration took office, went through those 65,000 calls, made follow-up, conducted a welfare check, and now that child has been rescued and that sponsor has been arrested. These are the safeguards that were put in place, but accountability and oversight was not had.
Ms. Hopper, you've worked closely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you see what she's up against, and she is one angel. Help her, be aware, share this out, listen to it again and again. Make sure that you're doing all that you can to save our children. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much, Allie. That was eye-opening, everybody. Don't you think? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for having me. I know that this is not the easiest subject to talk about, but
it's about
I
time.
I just really appreciate you having me on, having this honest, open conversation about things that are really impacting everyone across the country.
world.
So,
Yes,
yeah.
the universe. And you are so eloquent and look like a little angel there. Is your little outfit. You look fantastic. So you are doing it all, and we love you for it. Thank you. So,
Thank
ladies
you.
and gentlemen, share this out. Tell everyone about Guard Against Trafficking and Paul Hutchinson's, and see the movie. If you don't get it, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
He was like episode 59 or something, if you want to catch that replay. So we'll see you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Cynthia Manion Show. And if you want to write in and tell me what you did, we appreciate that too. Love you all. Thank you. For our children, hugs. Read them a good night story. Good night now.